They have been referred to as the Henrys, high earners, not rich yet. And a recent study found a majority of them feel like they live paycheck to paycheck. Alex Prochet spoke to some of them who say a six-figure salary may not go as far as you think.
We are the typical millennials.
I've been able to really expand those horizons and take the trips around the world.
I mean, I'm very, very lucky.
They're young, successful, and making good money. Some call them Henrys, short for high earners, not rich yet. They make more than $100,000 a year, usually in their 20s or 30s. The American dream, except when you factor in their student debt, rent, and personal spending. Many say that six-figure salary doesn't go nearly as far as you might think.
You're looking at the end of the month and you're kind of like, whoa, it costs this much to live?
A recent study found 60% of these so-called Henrys feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. Mind you, for reference, the median household income in the U.S. is about $70,000 a year.
Man, I haven't seen you since high school.
Ben GAUT is actually from my hometown of Marietta, Georgia. Now he works as a technology consultant in Atlanta, making between $100,000 and $200,000 a year.
I'm curious, had you ever heard of the term Henry before we discussed it?
No, I hadn't. It's a position that I always wanted to be in, but not rich yet is not a part that I expected to really have a delay on.
For Ben, a big part of that delay was due to his six-figure student loan debt.
But there's still work to be done to get to those goals that I had built up in my mind of what would happen at that point.
In New York, 30-year-old Turner Coles has a similar story. Student loan debt sometimes eats up so much of his income, it feels like he's paying a second rent.
If this is how I'm feeling, oh my God, what is somebody who makes the poverty line feeling?
According to educationdata.org, the average student loan debt in America is nearly $40,000. Priya Milani is the founder of Stash Wealth, a financial planning firm that works exclusively with Henrys.
The average Henry comes to us with around $80,000 in student debt. They've accumulated additional degrees, they've been in school longer, and so they have greater debt.
34-year-old Courtney Nichols doesn't have high student loan debt, but even with the $300,000 she and her husband make annually in Virginia, they feel like they have to watch their spending.
When you look at all the tangibles on paper, it's like, oh, they've got a lot of money. But in essence, for instance, 6 years ago, we were hit with a tax bill of almost $10,000. It's like as soon as you get ahead or you take a few steps forward, you take a few steps back.
Something else to account for, sky-high living cost. The median price for a home has spiked 19% in just 1 year, and it's particularly high in cities where many Henrys live. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C.
Some told us they want to be able to enjoy some luxuries for their hard work. There's also social elements, like FOMO culture.
There's a certain degree of what's known as lifestyle creep.
The lifestyle I want to create and what I believe that is out there for us and what's possible to attain that, I believe that's where the pressure comes from.
We're seeing all of our friends doing all these amazing things, buying homes, upgrading their car, and we as financial advisors see the credit card debt to back it up, but you don't realize that your friends have credit card debt, and so you just think, wow, if they can do it, I should be able to do it too, and it becomes this cycle that's very, very difficult to break.
Jennifer Castillo is a 34-year-old lawyer and blogger from Washington, D.C. She calls herself a Henry, bringing in about $130,000 a year. She says she's never felt the squeeze and is looking to redefine the term.
It may appear that I sort of subscribe to this buy it all, do it all lifestyle, right, with my budget, but it really is a highlight reel. So for the Gucci belt, it took me 2 years to be like, well, you could wear it with this outfit, you could wear it with that. So I would, sort of put money away towards it. Nothing that I buy is on a whim. I'm always planning for my purchases.
Think about it from your standpoint. What are your goals? Is your goal to be debt-free? Is your goal to be able to take vacations and go out to dinner without having to always think twice? Make those goals a priority. Otherwise, it's death by a million cuts.
Alex Prochet, ABC News, Atlanta.
And our thanks to Alex Prechet for that report. Well, as Alex mentioned, student loans are a financial drag for that group of millennials. The numbers are staggering and climbing. 45 million borrowers at the end of 2020 owed a record $1.7 trillion. And at the end of next month, many Americans who had their loans frozen since March of 2020 are in for a rude awakening when pandemic relief expires. Joining us to discuss the situation, Sandy BAUM, senior fellow at the Urban Institute. She's done a deep dive into who owes the most in student loans. Sandy, I first want to get your reaction to Alex's piece. Does that square with what you found with regard to student loans hitting high earners pretty hard?
Well, the first thing is that that story is about so much more than student loans, right? It's clear that student loans are a very small piece of what is going on with the people that you profiled in that story. It is true that those people who tend to be people who went to graduate school, have professional degrees, are earning a lot of money relative to other people in society. Yes, those are the people with the highest student loan debt. If you went to medical school or law school or business school, you're likely to have accumulated more than $100,000 in student debt. And if you only went and got an associate degree and have a relatively low-paying job, you probably have less student debt. So in dollar terms, yes, these people have more student debt, but that's not really, first of all, they're not struggling. Some people with student debt are really struggling, and these people don't seem to really understand what that would mean. But yeah, they would live better if they had their incomes without the student debt, that's for sure.
And Sandy, I want to go into the numbers a little bit here, because your study of Fed data shows that households with graduate degrees owe 56% of the outstanding education debt. But according to 2019 data, they also make more than twice the median income, $106,000 versus $47,000. Now, you say that forgiving all student debt would, as a result, deliver a big windfall for these people who you argue can afford to pay. But is it fair to leave them out if you're forgiving student debt for others and when they're carrying so much of the debt?
Well, let's say first we have a program in the federal government where if you have federal student loans, you can be in an income-driven repayment plan where what you pay is a share of your income. So if you're unemployed, you don't make payments. If you're working at the minimum wage, you don't make payments. But the more you earn, the more you pay. So, and in that program, if you can't pay it off, your undergraduate debt in 20 years, your graduate debt in 25 years, we will forgive the balances. So a lot of the debt that we project we will forgive is for graduate students because they can borrow sort of an infinite amount of money, and probably many of them won't pay it all off. So they are not excluded from that. If we were to forgive all outstanding student debt, which is really not a very good public policy idea, would you eliminate those people? Well, you could say, why don't we forgive X dollars of student debt, say $10,000 for everybody? But that wouldn't make a big dent in the $100,000 that many of those graduate students owe. But who's going to pay it back? It's the average taxpayer who's going to pay it if those borrowers who are struggling to live at their not yet rich lifestyle don't pay it back, then we're going to all pay it back.
Now, at the end of 2020, student debt topped $1.7 trillion, a 100% increase from 2010. So instead of issuing more and more debt and then maybe forgiving it down the line, what about tackling the cost of education itself? Why is college education so expensive in the United States?
Well, the real problem is that we don't have enough grant aid for people from low and moderate income households. So the people really struggling are people whose parents don't have any money, who can't help them pay to go to college, who really don't have any other resources. And if we had more grant aid for those people, then they would accumulate less student debt. There would be less of a Black student debt problem. It's a very big problem, and much less of a, quote, crisis. So yes, that would help a lot. Now, graduate students who are borrowing a lot of money, graduate programs are very expensive. And some people are going to graduate programs that don't actually get them high-paying jobs, and maybe they should consider not doing that, and then those programs wouldn't be able to thrive, right? So yeah, it would be better if college were cheaper, absolutely, and we need to work for helping people to pay college prices and for keeping college prices down, but that's not going to stop people from borrowing a lot of money to go and get professional degrees so that they can earn those $100,000 to $300,000 salaries we just saw discussed.
Sandy, one more question, if you don't mind. The freeze on loan repayments that's expiring September 30th. That means the return of interest charges and payments and pursuit of loans in default. Some Democrats are actually pushing for President Biden to extend that deadline. What are the implications on whether he does or does not?
Well, there's a lot of concern about if all of a sudden everybody has to start paying, will the bureaucracy be in place to help them do that? I mean, it's not should they have to pay. I mean, they have debts. They've gotten a really good deal for, a while not having to pay. But there could be a real problem with trying to get everybody to pay all of a sudden. If people are in income-driven repayment plans, if they're not employed, if they have low earnings, they won't have to make any significant payments. The only people in those plans who will have to pay are the people who actually have enough money to be able to afford it. So I would say to people watching, if you are not in an income-based plan and you're worried about being able to afford your payments when you have to pay them again, get into one of those plans. That's the best thing you can do to protect yourself.
Great advice. And I wish we could follow other parts of the country where our students didn't have to pay for college. The Urban Institute's Sandy BAUM. Appreciate you, Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.